How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Some idea.
I am not completely like other people.
What do you mean by that?
People dislike me because I am not completely like them. I am trying to do with my life something which few people try to do, and this influences my thinking and consequently my action.
What is it you're trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.
this the end? There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final time. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the dystopia. There's no place to hide. I'm burning in the dystopia. This is the final
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil dich ein in die Arbeit einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil dich ein in die Arbeit einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil dich ein in die Arbeit einweist und weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is where we watch the real far left, the furthest of the far left, the most dystopian of the dystopian. Because contrary to what popular belief is on the conservative right, Democrats are not socialists. Progressives are not socialists. Liberals are not socialists. We are not. Kamala Harris was not a socialist. Joe Biden was definitely not a socialist. There are real socialists and communists out there. And once a week, and possibly during the week as well if we feel like it, we take some time out to watch and listen to the real far left, the people who are pushing every crazy idea in the country today. Now, don't be fooled by Trump's executive orders. While I do think that some of them are good and some of them are not so good, the executive orders are not going to stop the real far left. Not in any way. People are going around on Twitter saying, woke is dead, DEI is dead, we killed it, yay, we're winning, pinky swear, trust me, bro. But the fact of the matter is the real far left is actually more energized than ever. If you believe the real far left has stopped fighting, because I've seen people saying this on Twitter lately, the left isn't fighting, the left isn't even fighting this. Bro, it's just because your influencers aren't covering it. It's just because the media is not covering it. It's because they aren't showing you the things that they don't want you to see. How do I know that? Because I monitor and watch the real far left almost every single day of my life and have been for years. And that's what we do on Socialism Saturday is I show you the things that ain't no one else showing you about the real far left, because there is a real enemy in this country. There is a real enemy that is the ones pushing critical race theory and anti-racist education in the schools, the ones that are pushing gender ideology and queer theory on the public, the ones that are pushing disability justice, the ones that are pushing environmental justice, the ones that are doing the so-called pro-Hamas protests that aren't really pro-Hamas, they're radical revolutionary socialists, the ones that are causing all the chaos and drama, abolish the police, defund the police. Every time you see a protest in the real world, it is always and forever the exact same people. And that is the radical revolutionary far left. Not the Democrats, not the progressives, not the liberals, not even the Democratic Socialists of America. Usually, there is a real enemy. And if you don't understand who your enemy is, if you don't understand what they believe, if you don't understand how they're strategizing, how they're organizing, because your shill conservative influencers refuse to tell you, then the left is going to win and we're all going to lose, and that's going to suck, and I don't really want that. So we do take some time out to watch them once a week for Socialism Saturday. Now, if this is your first time at Socialism Saturday, can you let me know in the chat if you're new here? Some of you, I think I saw some chats on the way in. Some of you subscribed to my channel a while ago. Maybe you haven't been around in a while. Things have changed on this channel in the last several years. So if you're new here, please let us know. It is very, very important that if you are new here, if you've never watched Socialism with me before, that you let us know that you're new, because we are basically creating an immersive experience for you to learn about the real socialist left. That can be a little bit overwhelming. It can be overwhelming because you don't understand the language. It can be overwhelming because these are ideas you haven't been exposed to before. It can be a lot, and we're going to have a big episode tonight. This is going to be, I think, a highly dystopian episode. And so we want to be able to identify new people, and I don't actually approve of this, Nick, because this makes it confusing. You are not new. You have been watching this stuff with me for years and years and years and years and years. So I would really prefer if you guys didn't do this, because there are actually new people here. You are not one of them. And I would actually like to be able to have the new people be able to identify as new people. Because here's the thing, Nick. Here's the thing. If you know all the answers and you're identifying as new in the chat, that's going to freak the actual new people out, okay? And you're not the only one that does this. I've seen Murphy's Pool do this. Bot does this. Like, I've seen you guys playing around with this. I would really prefer that you didn't, because we actually want to be able to invite the new people in and make them feel welcome. And if everyone that says they're new is just getting right answer after right answer, that's gonna alienate the new people, okay? So let's just be honest about it. Nick's been watching Socialism with me for years. Bot's been watching Socialism with me for years. Reagan's been watching Socialism with me for years. Rottweiler's been watching. Everyone you see with a wrench has been watching Socialism with me for literally years. They're not new. They know what's up. But there is a learning curve when you first start watching Socialism, in that the left uses a completely different language than what you probably use. They may use the same words you use. They do not have the same definitions that you use. It is the same vocabulary. It is not the same dictionary, all right? I highly encourage new people here to participate in the chat, to ask questions. I know I can be intimidating. I know I yell sometimes, but if I'm yelling, if I'm being intimidating, it's because I'm trying to articulate a message. And sometimes we need to smack people upside the head and be like, no, you need to look at what's going on, because there is a cognitive dissonance that takes place when you start watching this content. And quite frankly, a lot of people need to be smacked upside the head and told, no, that's not what's going on. Here's what it is. Okay, so sometimes we have to get a little aggressive because that is all that some people will listen to. But it is all for a purpose. I really do want other people to learn. Tranquility, welcome. I've watched several videos. I have a lot to learn. As much of what's out there obscures the truth, often changing. No. This is actually one of the first things that you need to learn. The far left is incredibly consistent in their definitions. They don't change their definitions. This is not true. The idea that they're often changing definitions on a whim, they do not change definitions. They're actually incredibly consistent. They're consistent across groups. They're consistent across all different types of activists. The reason that you might think that they are inconsistent is because their definitions are confusing. And if you don't understand the core root of the definition, then it's going to seem like they're all over the place. So if you and this is something I really want to articulate, if you don't know what these words mean, or you're like, that definition doesn't make sense, please ask the question and we will break it down for you what the definition is. But their language is incredibly consistent, and we've seen that over the course of years and years and years and years and years. Now, we do have a big episode tonight, and I'm actually excited about this. So yesterday, we found a secret video of our favorite Abolish the Family communist, Sophie Lewis. And if you missed yesterday's stream, I highly recommend going back and watching it, because it was one of the all-time great Sophie streams. It just was. It had everything. It had Abolish the Family. It had queer politics. It had feminism. It had Sophie talking about manufacturing children in bio bags outside the womb in order to create a world of gender equity. It had everything. And the reason it had everything was because Sophie is very inspired by this 60s, 70s feminist, Shumalith Firestone, Jewish, of course. Shumalith Firestone wrote a book in 1970 called The Dialectic of Sex that is next level insane. It is all of our most favorite dystopian topics all rolled into one. And this is one of Sophie's inspirations. Now, I didn't really know that much about Shumalith Firestone before yesterday's stream, but after yesterday's stream, I started searching around for videos on Shumalith Firestone. And wouldn't you know it, I found another Sophie video, and I always knew this video existed. I just didn't want to watch it because I didn't know who Shumalith Firestone was. So I found another Sophie video where she is talking about the same person she was talking about yesterday. And this is on a channel that we have watched before called Rabbles of the World. And the presentations that we have watched on this channel are next level dystopian queer politics crazy. We have transgender and queer Marxism. Emmy O'Brien and Abolish the Family has been on here. This channel hasn't been updated in years, but the videos that are on this channel are just like top level queer politics. So I was like, listen, now that we've gotten our introduction to Shumalith Firestone via the Secret Sophie video that we watched yesterday, now we're ready to watch another video of Sophie talking about this person. And so that's what we're going to be watching today. We got our primer yesterday. If you didn't see yesterday's stream, that's okay. You'll be able to keep up, because the description of this says, in this video, we talked to Sophie Lewis about Shumalith Firestone, how can her work inspire our present thinking about family abolition, the relationship between feminism and queer politics, fem and somatopia, I don't know, and reproductive technology. Reproductive technology means birthing babies outside of the womb to create a world in which everyone belongs to everyone else, of which there is no nuclear family. There are no, no parental rights, essentially. If you birth, no gender, no parental rights. This is the really hardcore stuff. So if this is your first ever Socialism Saturday, welcome. We're going to scare the shit out of you tonight. I promise you. And it's going to be great. So we got a whole timestamps here. It looks like we got some good dystopian coverage. That's what we're going to be watching tonight, guys. If everyone is ready for this, it's going to be a great night. Now, what I will say is just a few orders of business before we get started. We do kind of have to jump into the presentation relatively quickly because at 9 p.m. tonight, there is a movie night in my supporter Discord. It is the premiere of B's, C's, and Double D's, and they're going to be watching Meet the Feebles. And what it's going to be in the supporter Discord is like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 takeover, where they're going to be doing commentary over the movie. This is the first time they've ever tried this. It's going to be with a horrible B movie called Meet the Feebles, and that's going to be at 9 p.m. tonight in the supporter Discord. So I'm really trying to get Socialism Saturday done before 9 p.m. tonight so that everyone can go enjoy the movie. Then tomorrow for movie night, we're going to be watching Dirty Dancing. It is the start of Romance Movie Month. On Monday for movie night, we're going to be watching A Walk to Remember. So there will be 3 movies over the next couple days in my supporter Discord. How can you get access to the supporter Discord? You go over to my Substack. That is Carlin, KARLYN.substack.com, and you sign up as a supporter for $8 a month, $80 a year. Once you do that, you click on this digest email that's right in the center of the page. You scroll all the way down to the bottom, and underneath that red box, you are going to find the link to join the supporter Discord. Tomorrow, I will be sending out a new link because the link changes every week. But if you want to join for the movie night tonight, you can still find that link at the bottom of the email, and it should still work. If it doesn't, let me know. I will provide you with another one. You can DM me on Substack. You can DM me on Twitter, whatever it is. But go into the verification channel, let us know where you're a supporter on, and we'll get you verified in time for the movie night tonight. That is one way you can support the work I'm doing, and I think it's going to be a great little time having this little movie night experiment. Another way you can support the work I'm doing is by heading over to the Unwoke Art store. That is unwokeart.com. This is my merchandise store where I sell all sorts of cool anti-communist and unwoke swag. And of course, for one more day or 2 more days, one more day until Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. We have the Trump I Love You Valentine's Day limited edition design. This is going to be 25% off until Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. And you can get it in t-shirts, you can get it in cards, you can get it in wrapping paper, candles, a mug, a glass, even on a stuffed animal. You can create the perfect little Valentine's Day gift for the Trump lover in your life. This is a limited edition design. It will only be in the store for 1 more week leading up to Valentine's Day, and then it's going away and it's never coming back. So if you like the design, pick it up now. It's 25% off until Sunday. And then you get 1 more week after that to get it, and then it's done because it is a limited edition design. And I gotta say, I do love this design. I love the color. I think Trump looks great. I love the hearts. I love the pop arty feel of it. And I really think this will make the Trump lover in your life smile if you want to pick it up. So go ahead over to the Unwoke Art store. You can also get all sorts of other cool merch while you're there. I have tons and tons and tons of designs in the store. You can click on whatever design suits your fancy and then pick out whatever merch you want. And we've got lots of good stuff, and it looks cool, and the merchandise is great quality. I wear it almost exclusively. I wear my own merch. I only make my own merch because I like wearing it. And so pick it up, and you can get some cool shit. And you'll have to cut out the shoulder in your own shirt if you want to do that. It doesn't come like that, all right? It comes like a normal t-shirt. I just like to spice things up a little bit. All right, we're going to dig into it. Now, I do want to go over the rules really, really quickly before we dig into our screening today. So let me get the rules up on the screen. Now, we take this seriously. I know we have fun. We like to joke around. We like to pal around. We will probably be making fun of them on our way through this stream. But what I do want everyone to know is we take this seriously. You have to envision yourself when you come to Socialism Saturday. You are sitting in a classroom. I am the teacher of the class. You are the student in the class, and I expect you to behave accordingly. So what does that mean? If you don't like the things I'm saying, then you need to control yourself and just get up and leave, okay? What I don't want to see is you having a meltdown, you having an emotional hissy fit, you starting to shitpost in my chat, you becoming a distraction for everyone else. You would never, if you were in a real world classroom, just stand up and start yelling at the teacher and throwing things at the wall. You wouldn't do that in real life. I expect you not to do it in the chat, because although we do have fun with each other and that's okay, we also do take this very seriously. So just keep that in mind. Number 2, don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in the chat. I am the queen, feminist, not feminist. Oh God, I'm not a feminist. Oh, I didn't mean feminist at all. No, strike that, reverse it. It's going to get clipped out of context. No. I'm absolutely not a feminist, but I am the queen fascist bitch. There we go. That's what I was looking for. I am the queen fascist bitch dictator of this YouTube channel, okay? And so I will say and do whatever I want. And but if you aren't insulting me and you aren't insulting other people in the chat, then chances are I'm not going to do anything mean to you, okay? But if you start shit, there will be shit, and I will win and you will lose, and that's just going to be the way it goes. So just rein it in, guys. Don't be a dick. We're all here to learn about this stuff together. So just keep it cool. Number 3, no whining. If I ask you to stop doing something, I don't want to hear whining. I don't want to hear complaining. I don't want to hear excuses. I just want you to stop doing the thing I asked you to stop doing, okay? I don't have kids for a reason. I don't want to hear whining in my own home. I certainly don't want to hear whining from adults on the internet. So just keep it to yourself. You can cry at home where no one can see you, but you cannot bring that into my chat because that is just not allowed. It's annoying and I don't want to deal with it. Number 4, this is the most important thing. Our job here is to listen. We need to listen to these people talk about what they believe so that we can understand how they view the world. If you do not understand your enemy, you can never defeat them. As part of listening, we do have a rule here on this channel that we do not debunk. I promise you, any debunking that you bring into the chat, 1 million people have brought in before you. Why are socialists engaging in capitalism if they want to abolish it? We already know the answer to that. They're allowed to do it. It says it in the Communist Manifesto. Why don't they just move to Venezuela or Cuba? Because they want socialism in the United States. Don't they know that this is crazy? No, they don't know that it's crazy. That's why it's their worldview. We do know that it's crazy, and I promise you, saying it's crazy over and over and over again in my chat is not actually going to change what they believe. Debunking changes nothing. If debunking was going to solve the problem, we already would have solved the problem, okay? So we have to try a new strategy, and the new strategy that we're trying is to listen, to be able to understand what these people believe and why they believe it and how they're trying to push these ideas into the world. Because if we understand that, then we can get ahead of them and get strategic about how we're fighting them. Lastly, I don't like to ban people, but if you break my rules and you don't listen when I tell you to stop, I will ban you from my chat because you are not going to muck up my nice little classroom that I've spent years creating here. So those are the rules. If anyone has any questions about the rules, please do let me know, and we will take it from there. But otherwise, guys, listen, be here to learn. We can have fun. Having fun is fine. But ultimately, we are here to learn. We are here to challenge ourselves, to understand the world from another person's perspective. And that world tonight is going to be from the perspective of Sophie Lewis. And Sophie is our queen. She is our ginger dragon. Even though she is a communist, even though she is queer, even though she yells at me every time I try to talk to her in the DMs, even though she never responds to Bot when Bot tries to speak to her in Spanish or in Arabic. We love our Sophie, okay? No one will besmirch Sophie because she gives us a lot of information and she says the quiet part out loud and she is delightful to listen to. And so now we're going to go ahead and jump in and we're going to get started. And just hang on to your hats, guys. Hang on to your hats for what we're about to watch into. I promise you it's not going to be like anything else you've watched this week. All right, let's see what Sophie had to say.
It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you're going to give us first a small intro on Shulamit Firestone and her dialectics, right? Yeah.
I'm not going to use a script or notes, and hopefully you ask for about 10 minutes, so we'll see how coherent I manage to be about this super important sort of root text for my politics. I seem to have, those of you who, watching might be vaguely aware that I also have a very complicated relationship to Donna Haraway, who I sort of love the early work and then had a very kind of impassioned, kind of hostile response to some more recent kind of natalist directions in her philosophy.
Sophie.
Might begin to kind of wonder if I have some sort of matricidal impulse, which I have actually taken really seriously, because I am against the tendency towards matricide in feminist philosophy, right? Of course, there's a possibility that I'm not completely self-aware here, but what I believe and what I strive towards is a much more kind of complex, comradely, angry at times, but kind of conflictually, sort of disloyally loving approach to for I was going to say for mothers, but given that the category of motherhood is so vexed, I'm going to kind of see if we can think about a different, a forebear of a sort of cyborg ecological politics dear to my heart. Shulamith Firestone is, as many people have written, the kind of demon child of feminist history in many respects. And it's very sort of difficult to navigate through the weeds of apologistic kind of recuperative Firestone discourses and the kind of purely sort of simplistic dismissals, and on both sides we have complex kind of unholy alliances. Those who condemn her are in some senses among them you find patriarchs, but you also find revolutionary feminists and you find liberal feminists, and on the other side as well those who like Shuli, as she was known, are just as diverse as those who fear and loathe her. So it's a really complex task. She was, just to give a really brief overview, the child of an Orthodox Jewish family who wanted more than anything to be an artist and went to art school in Chicago, and became, one of the key figures in the women's liberation movement. She was involved in, founding several of the key revolutionary groups of, New York radical feminism, basically, and in the important history of women's liberationism by Alice Eccles that, it's important to be aware of, Daring to be Bad. Shuli, it comes into focus as one of the real sort of the real firebrands of this New York radical milieu in the 60s. So in 1970, this, completely, bananas, miraculous text comes out by this, kind of prodigy, Shulamith Firestone, which kind of remixes Marx, Engels, Freud, and many other kind of canonical figures of, what she would probably call, mainstream philosophy, very, very breezily in its first few pages, and kind of proceeds to elaborate, as the first kind of edition called it, in all caps with an exclamation point, the case for feminist revolution, brackets, chapter 6 will change your life. It is not, actually possible, I think, to overstate how utopian the vision expressed in the dialectic of sex really is. And I mean utopian in a very specific sense. I'm not interested in visions of utopia that envision a kind of post-political, post-agonistic kind of island where everything is kind of fine. But I'm interested in utopianism of the kind of almost child.
Okay, so for anyone that's new and you're like, what the fuck is even going on right now? What is this woman talking about? We just need to wait. We just need to allow this to play out. Sophie oftentimes says a lot of words because she speaks in a very flowery way. But in Sophie speaking in a flowery way, eventually Sophie is going to say the craziest shit that you have ever heard a human being say. And it's going to sneak right up on you. It's going to be like someone sneaking up behind you and going, boo! It's going to sneak right up on you. You're not going to see it coming. So we just need to wait, okay? I know this is boring at first. Wait.
This blinkered quality that asks why received realities, why the production of nature as we know it should be accepted, and insists in a sort of pig-headed, stubborn way on a really truly livable life, and on keeping every possibility on the table. And so for Shulamith, and she says this in the first few pages, complete communist revolution it is absolutely obviously necessary, but it's not even enough, right?
It's not enough. Okay.
If there is a word more totalizing than revolution, more all-encompassing than revolution, we would use it. I can't quite find the exact phrase, but she's very clear about this. For her, the communization of all aspects of reality is something she doesn't even really need to defend or argue. That's already kind of a given. And for her, she's impatient with people's conservatism in wanting only that. So it kind of really, it's a hell of a sort of whiplash sensation, I think, diving into this book. I this is me being sympathetic to it, but I should say, I disagree with many of the premises on which she bases, her dialectic, which she says is, based on sexuate sort of biological difference. The before we get to,
This is 3 years ago, so this would be, I think, in 2021. Little over 3 years ago.
True liberation. No, sorry, I misphrased this. I don't know if you can. I'm saying for her, sex difference is more important than that which Marx and Engels are concerned with, and therefore, communist revolution may occur without real revolution, i.e., sexual liberation taking place. So she makes, I disagree with this, and of course, recent, communist advances in theory around the sex-gender distinction, which in some ways, you can't really fault Firestone for not having developed yet, I suppose. But of course, we for me, there is very little that appeals to me here in this kind of constant insistence she has that sex is more radical of an oppression, more all-encompassing. But having said that, if you can get past the really sort of brutally dated elements of her argumentation, and the hallmarks of her, very depressing fights with, what she calls the male chauvinist labor movement, the male chauvinist Black radical movement as well. If you can get past the sort of the completely unacceptable reactivities and prejudices she has actually towards femmes, towards anti-racists, which are not really, I'm not proposing to forgive them, but if we can suspend attention to them, we have, I think, an arguably extremely queer text, a text that undoes itself, and which reaches a place quite different to its beginning in its final pages. Because although, I've just been this morning revisiting the opening salvos and then contrasting them to the final chapter, which is called The Ultimate Revolution. And she really kind of lays down what she calls her demands and speculations around feminism and ecology, around what abolishing the family would really mean, and so on and so forth. And by this point, although she spent so much time, just 200 pages before, talking about, how, left predilections and preoccupations should be, taken with a grain of salt, and we should really all kind of wake up to the primacy of sex. She's the final sentences, are simply concerned with.
Hang on, Cindy. If you are driven away from learning about the left because they say I know it's annoying, I get it, but that's not a good reason, girl. It's not a good reason. We train for this. We train for these moments. We just got to work through it.
A cybernetic communism that would abolish economic classes and all forms of labor exploitation, granting all people a livelihood based only on material needs. Eventually, work would be eliminated in favor of play, activity done for its own sake by adults as well as children, and with the disappearance of motherhood and the obstructing incest taboo, sexuality would.
The disappearance of motherhood and the obstructing incest taboo of sexuality. I don't know exactly what that means, but that sounds pretty crazy.
Be reintegrated, allowing love to flow unimpeded.
She's arguing in favor of what the fuck? Sophie! Sophie is reading a text arguing in favor of incest. Again.
Activity done for its own sake by adults as well as children, and with the disappearance of motherhood and the obstructing incest taboo, sexuality would be reintegrated, allowing love to flow unimpeded.
We have to allow incest to allow love to flow unimpeded. Now, I'm not sure Sophie is saying what she personally believes. I think she's reading from the text. Again, the text is The Dialectic of Sex by Shumalith Firestone in the 1970s. There are and I feel the need to be intellectually honest about this. Sophie is very clear that she does not agree with some of the things in this text. She's reading the text. All right? Let's just listen to that one more time and then we're going to let her talk. But that's crazy.
Granting all people a livelihood based only on material needs. Eventually, work would be eliminated in favor of play, activity done for its own sake by adults as well as children, and with the disappearance of motherhood and the obstructing incest taboo, sexuality would be reintegrated, allowing love to flow unimpeded. And the word women doesn't even occur in that in this final passage.
No
right?
Gender.
It's been kind of dialectically transcended, I suppose. So you have to put on a kind of trans feminist lens to engage with the dialectic of sex, but I think there is a great deal to be gained from doing that. In a recent very personal lecture I gave about my relationship to Firestone and the way that she reminds me of my impossible, like Firestone,
the one we
and
watched
like
yesterday.
Firestone, very kind of depressed, unhappy, abusive, arguably, and kind of wronged and sort of tragic alcoholic mother who died last year. I wanted to insist as well that in the criticism of Firestone, I rarely see it said how horny she is. And recently we've had a kind of return, I think, in some parts of the queer left to looking at figures like Mario Mieli towards a gay communism, and of course Chris Chitty's extraordinary sexual hegemony. And it just really occurred to me that Firestone, and this makes sense because she is kind of, on the face of it, just astonishingly hetero sexist, like sort of limited to heterosexuality, and I'm not asking for a sort of excuse for this. It's dumb, it's absurd, it's a real failing in the text, but she loves to fuck, and the main thing she loves hopes for in many ways for the post-revolutionary society, it has to do with the conditions of possibility for pleasurable fucking. And that constitutes a sort of affinity, I think, with figures like Miele. And although there is a different approach to the utopian in Chitty, also Chitty, because I think we could gain something from weaving together Firestone's materialist view on history as a process of kind of imprisonment of women and children within homes, and the
hang on, we got a question. Is she saying that to be heterosexual is a weekend of this? No, that's not what she's saying. What she's saying is that that Shumalith Firestone engaged in heterosexism, which should put like the heterosexual relationship above queer relationships. And when they say heterosexual relationship, they're not actually saying man and woman, because in their world, and I know this might seem complicated, but we know this is true, in their world, monogamy is considered to be the heterosexual relationship. So if you have a gay couple, they are considered to be, and that gay couple is in a monogamous 2-person relationship, and they get married, and don't have to agree with gay marriage, but they can do that. And they get married, they buy a house. That is going to be considered homonormativity, which is basically the same thing as like gay people assimilating to straight culture. So when they're talking about heterosexual or straight, they're not actually saying what it sounds like. They're not saying one man and one woman. They are saying people who engage in monogamous 2-person relationships within the capitalist norms of society. So that's what they're talking about. Yeah, she means heteronormative relationship. Exactly. And I know that's confusing for people who are new, but I have a clip on my Substack where they explicitly say that when they say straight, they don't mean straight. They mean normative. Okay? So you can refer to the Substack for that. Could it be that in the utopia without families, there would be by default be no incest? You can choose who to sleep with freely. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right, because in the Marxist utopia, there would be no nuclear families because children would be raised communally. There would be no parents because children are not being born in the womb. They're being born outside the womb. Yes, they really do talk about this. We just saw Sophie talk about this yesterday. Hopefully she talks about it again tonight. But that is actually a good point. If there's no nuclear family, is there any incest? Great question. I don't know the answer to it. Maybe we'll find out.
The history of kind of the policing and disciplining of deviant sexual populations, and the repression of a sort of imminent transsexualism, for Miele. So, this would be a case, I guess, for Firestone against Firestone, a kind of queer, trans, feminist, hedonistic Firestone that kind of bursts imminently from between the cracks of her deeply and frustratingly limited, utopian manifesto. I don't know. I'll pause now.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful, and actually, you already touched on both things that I really wanted to talk to you about. My first question was that I wanted to ask was about how we read texts like Firestone's. And maybe you have already answered this question to the extent that it's even possible to answer this question. But I mean, you in all of your writing, you draw on like a very eclectic array of sources. And I mean, at the moment, I'm also working with texts from the sort of 60s and 70s. And I mean, when we read them today, they're just like full of all of these political faux pas. And the radical feminists in particular are often remembered for a lot of like racism and biological essentialism and queerphobia. And I think some of it strikes us as like quite embarrassing and naive at best. And this is why you mentioned reading Schulam and Firestone is a complex task. And I mean, most of what you just sort of spoke about were disavowals of a lot of what she wrote, but at the same time holding on to the utopian and revolutionary element. I don't know that this is possible to answer, but I guess my question is, when you work with texts like Firestone, it's not just Firestone. How do you like how do we read them in a way that's sort of ethical and also like politically? You know what I mean. What I'm getting at, like, how do
Mizakan, our booksmith, as it were. Mizakan has all the quotes from all the books from the book that we're talking about, so that to eliminate the incest taboo, we would have to eliminate the family and sexuality as it is now structured. So when Julian asked earlier, could it be that in the utopia without families, there would be by default be no incest? It seems that is exactly the argument that's being made. Excellent. Excellent find. Hey, there's no incest in the Marxist utopia. No families, but no incest.
Is it about recuperation, or is it about reading a text through a as you said, like a queer trans feminist lens from today? Or is it about suspending certain issues in order to cover something?
Yeah. Well, I think reading Firestone with your emotional responses kind of switched on has been useful for me. So rather than actually adopting that kind of haughty sort of almost kind of numbed approach to texts from the 60s, where we know so much better now, and therefore we're kind of academically removed. I think actually paradoxically I've found it much more generative but maybe this is a personal thing, because as I say, I have associations between Shirley and her kind of witty, like mean and tragic life trajectory. The beautiful quote that is often kind of fronted in reflections on her. There was a massive N+1 double feature where people kind of poured out their love for this figure, but in itself, this kind of, memorialization and celebration was tragic in a meta sense, because so many of the people who were appreciating her hadn't seen her for decades, and loved her even though they couldn't really stand her. And she disappeared after writing this book almost entirely from the political scene, and then died alone in an apartment in New York, despite efforts on the part of certain kinds of committees of comrades to help her, to intervene in her spiral into suicidality and isolation. But so I think, sorry, to finish my thought, I think understanding the person is perhaps not something I would seek to avoid. I think it's a personal text, and there are lots of people who engage with it more impersonally, but I think this text tells us something about our own seductions into reaction. She has somatophobic, kind of femme-phobic heteronormative sorts of failings as a person, and perhaps some of the kind of unkindness and callousness and lack of empathy towards people she calls, politicos, women in the Black Panthers. She is really angry at them for being so kind of, she quotes certain instances of pamphlets where she thinks the women of the Black Panthers are being just disgustingly kind of indulgent towards male ego, and but all these kinds of animuses she has, all these kinds of grumpy, nasty, unempathetic forms of radicalism, you can relate them quite easily to personalities in the political ecology of today, like dirtbag discourses, sorts of phobic, anti-woke posturing. And so I think if you for me, clearly I've tried to be a bit confessional about how, loving while raging against Shuli is a similar process to me as the process of grieving my mother, but that's also kind of, repairing myself and inquiring into the forms of kind of repetition and continuity of these failures in myself. So it can be, I guess that's an argument for a kind of almost therapeutic encounter with this text, because it is so vitally personal. I should say, right? Like, not everyone maybe knows this. It's written as a kind of comic monologue in many cases. It's a utopian manifesto that is not pretending, organizational objectivity. This is pure Shuli, the phrases, the made up words. She has a real kind of, sort of stand up character in her prose. It's like,
one of the things that I appreciate about the left that I don't see on the right at all, well, I guess I do see it on the right, but I don't see it on the conservative right. It's more in like the dissident right. It's like, I see this with the Groypers. I don't see this with any other community, is that there is an appreciation for, even if it's, I don't know exactly how to articulate this, even if it's crazy. And Sophie is admitting that some of the things in this book are crazy, and Sophie doesn't agree with everything in this book. But even if there are some crazy things said, there can still be like an appreciation for the artfulness with which the document was created. There can be kind of an appreciation for, I don't know if this is exactly what I want to say, but it's the only words that are coming to mind. There can be an appreciation for imperfection, for someone just throwing shit out there, and maybe it's not perfect, and maybe some of the ideas aren't thought through, but in amidst the crazy, you can find like these nuggets. And I look at the right, and the right is constantly talking about, you're mentally ill, you're crazy, you're mentally ill, you're crazy, everyone we don't like is a narcissist, everyone we don't like is cluster B personality disorder. And it's like, on the left, Shulamith Firestone was a schizophrenic. Shulamith Firestone died in her apartment by herself because she was a schizophrenic, okay? But just because Shulamith Firestone was a schizophrenic and crazy does not mean that she's just gate-kept out of the left. And that's why these ideas percolate up. And I'm not saying, again, I'm not saying I appreciate these ideas. I'm not saying I want these ideas implemented in society. But it does, to me, seem to be a better way to go about things than just dismissing every single thing a person says because you don't like the tone they said it, or you don't like their haircut, or you think they're fat, or you think they're a narcissist, or any of these stupid things that happens on the right. And this is why their ideas percolate up into culture, because they don't do that. And I wonder what would happen if people on the right maybe took the fucking seatbelt off every once in a while and they just let it go and they just said what they wanted to say without obsessing over image and presentation and branding, darling, and the narrative and the messaging and all this bullshit that the right obsesses over. I wonder what would just happen and how much more successful they would be if they just took off the fucking seatbelt and said whatever they wanted to fucking say. You know, consequences be damned. Yeah, on the right, you say one thing they don't like, and they're like, I don't want to talk. You can't sit with us. You can't sit with us at the lunch table. Just because some are mentally impaired doesn't mean their ideas are any. Well, it means their ideas might be more dangerous, right? But that doesn't mean they're dismissed. Groypers are the only right-wing group that artists commonly associated with. There is a psychological. Yeah, I agree with that. There are a lot of artists. People don't understand this about Nick Fuentes and the Groypers. There are artists in that community. When I say artists, there are a lot of musicians in that community. There are people that are actually creating artwork. There are people that are doing this performance art thing online. There are artists in that, and that's honestly what makes it so cool. So, you know, I know a lot of people don't like Nick Fuentes and you don't like the ideas he has, but they are the only ones who have the ability to create actual culture, because they're the only community on the right that I've been able to find where there is artistry, where there's creativity, where those things are encouraged. They create entire groups around doing music, doing art, like talking about cultural things. They hold Twitter spaces all the time where they talk about this stuff. No one else on the right is doing this, and that's part of why they're so dangerous. Hey, Kevin from the internet. I haven't seen you in a while. I hope you're doing well.
Listening to an extremely talented stand-up comedian, you know, who is, you know, weaving in her own flavors all the time. Yeah, I guess so. So to answer your question, I think it's. I think it also helps, you know, to remember that there were all kinds of different feminism in the 60s. There wasn't, you know, the racist, kind of naive, endlessly kind of you know, dismissed as such second wave feminism doesn't really exist, you know. Emma Heaney mentions, dedicates a whole book to this, really, in sort of turning the received version of you know, cis feminist history on its head, and, you know, explaining how, via a combination of sort of sexological science and trans feminine allegory in literature throughout modernism, that, you know, feminism became cis, was made cis, you know. And this is a more sophisticated project, building on, you know, Alice Eccles's super important insistence in her history that what has been written as the history of the second wave is actually the version written down by a super reactionary, and at the time recognized as such, as reactionary, fringe element of that ecology of utopian and less utopian elements, who were, yeah, queerphobic, transphobic, and sort of woundedly attached to a universalist definition of sexed suffering and femaleness as suffering. And they, you know, they get to explain what radical feminism was, and they are still doing it in England, you know, weirdly enough, in the sort of mainstream institutions of establishment British culture. And so, you know, we that is the second wave. That's the hegemonic definition. But of course, in the 60s, there were lots of people saying, you know, much more nuanced things than Firestone about the relationship between race and sex, and, you know, the dynamics of kind of queer revolution, as we know, because we have new translations of Miele and so on. However, as you know, and I'm sure this is kind of why you've invited me, you know, I'm someone who believes that there is a an important case to be made for reviving family abolitionist discourse in the
Bing.
21st century. And my book could not have, existed without Firestone lightening.
No. We don't do this here. We do not do the typical conservative owning the libs thing where everyone I don't like is crazy. We don't do this here. Sophie Lewis might have ideas that you don't like. She might have ideas that you don't agree with. She's not crazy. I've studied this woman a long time. I've listened to almost every single talk this woman has given. She's not crazy, and we're not going to dismiss her as that. She has different values.
The spark, right? I forgot to finish that quote because I ramble, but the really tear-jerking phrase that gets kind of quoted in memorializations of Firestone is that she lit the spark and took the heat, as her name implies, Firestone. And the spark she lit in my, I can't believe I'm tearing up over Shuli. It's just really intense the way I respond to her as a figure. But the way she addresses pregnancy and what I then in full surrogacy now call the problem of pregnancy is, I think, an inexaggerably important contribution to radical thought. I don't share her somatophobic reasons for questioning pregnancy. My take on pregnancy is that everybody should be allowed to do whatever kind of life-endangering, kind of kinky, extreme sport that they like, as long as there is a situation, an infrastructure, a society that doesn't compel you to do that again.
So I just want to emphasize what Sophie just said because it may have gone by so quickly. Sophie believes that pregnancy is a kinky, extreme sport that is literally life-threatening. She writes about this in one of her books. Like in the introduction to one of her books, I think it's Feminism Against Family, she talks about how dangerous it is to give birth to kids.
Against your will. And perhaps, we could think about why 300,000 people die doing this particular kind of labor, and we still think it's just normal and natural and even to be expected of people that they engage in it, right? So, discipline me more into
awesome. No. It's awesome, and it's going in. I mean, actually, there's so much. I mean, the histories in like Alice Eccles' work and Emma Heaney's work is such an important thing for precisely this reason, that we can sort of better understand the conditions under which this intellectual work was being produced, and then hopefully engage with it more productively. But I think Felix, we should definitely link the N+1 thing in the description, because it's just such a wonderful collection of letters, or whatever we might call them. And it's everybody that engages with Shulamith Firestone seems to remember her so much for her, just sort of her nature, and her revolutionary spirit and her utopianism. And I wanted to ask you, like, because you're also quite an incandescent writer, the genre has kind of disappeared. We don't find this very much, and there's like resonances between that spirit in both of your work. I'm sure you're aware of that, but I mean, maybe this isn't something you want to comment on, and we've already moved into the territory of family abolition. So if you want to come back to that, feel free to. One thing I'm really curious about is in this project of family abolition, which also kind of like Firestone herself disappeared very quickly. That was being written at a time when the nuclear family was something very different to what it is today. And Christopher Chitty writes about this very well. So in this sort of like sexually hegemonic era, is what he would call it, we have basically the reconsolidation of the Fordist nuclear family in the post-war era.
I love it when they call it the Fordist nuclear family. We only really hear them call it Fordist nuclear family when they're on like the extreme far left. So what do they mean? Pop quiz for the chat. What do they mean when they call the nuclear family the Fordist nuclear family, as in Ford, as in Henry Ford, as in the car. What do they mean when they say the Fordist nuclear family? Does anyone know? As a reminder, when people are while people are answering, for people who are not familiar with family abolition, the far left does want to abolish the nuclear family. It's not because they want the state to be your family. It's not because they have mommy and daddy issues. It's not because they don't want kids. The left wants to abolish the nuclear family because they believe that the nuclear family is the reproduction mechanism of capitalism, where parents have kids and they raise those kids with capitalist values, and therefore the nuclear family reproduces capitalism. They also don't want generational wealth to be passed from parent to child because that keeps generational wealth privatized and outside of the reach of the collective. Sophie also has issues in regards to community care, where people only have access to the care that their family can provide them. So again, it's really important to understand this. It is not because they don't have kids. Some of them do have kids. Sophie doesn't, but some of them do. It's not because they hate their parents. It's not because they want the state to be your family. It's not because of any of those things. There are reasons that they want to abolish the family, and we need to acknowledge those. Okay, so they're calling it the Fordist nuclear family, as in Ford. It does have to do with the factory. The capitalist nuclear family, as in a production line. What did Ford usher in? What did Ford usher in, guys? Does anyone know? The nuclear family is based in capitalist production. Like factory production, yep, because the nuclear family reproduces capitalism. But what is Ford emblematic of? The Industrial Revolution. That's why they're calling it the Fordist nuclear family. Ford created a system where they have nuclear family as the Ford didn't create that. Ford created a car, right? But it's kind of the same thing. It's the manufacturing of capitalism. Yep. It is the nuclear family. That is actually a great way to put it. The nuclear family is an assembly line that pumps out capitalist kids. That's actually what the left believes. Capitalist as a result of industrialization that happened under Henry Ford. Exactly. Ford revolutionized the assembly line. It was about the assembly line, the Industrial Revolution. What is more emblematic of capitalism than the Industrial Revolution? As a reminder, capitalism is defined as private property ownership. When the left is talking about abolishing capitalism, they are not talking about abolishing crony capitalism or corrupt capitalism. They're talking about abolishing private property ownership, your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental that you rent out as a landlord, your ability to own a private business, whether that private business be big or small, your ability to own intellectual property, your parental rights over your kids are considered to be a form of private property, very relevant to what we're about to get into. Your individual liberties are considered to be a form of private property. Well done, guys. Well done. Good answers. All right, let's hear it.
About this very well. So in this sort of like sexually hegemonic era is what he would call it, we have basically the reconsolidation of the Fordist nuclear family in the post-war era, which is sort of central to a lot of structural adjustments that are happening. So the rationalization of the production process and yeah. Can you say something about the context in which these thinkers were writing and what the family meant when they were talking about family abolition in the late 60s and 70s?
Yeah, I think you're right to bring up the fact that it had some differences. I think I would insist that there are still continuities in the form of the family that we're facing today and the form that Firestone was invading against in 1968, 1970. Yeah, I mean, this kind of, as you say, it's defined by the post-war. I mean, she talks about this in her second chapter about American feminism, which is just, by the way, parenthetically, super weird as well. I should have maybe mentioned that she has a level of, enthusiasm for sort of figures like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony that I find completely mystifying, right? But she kind of gives this, she does a historical summary of why you know, the conditions that Betty Friedan described poorly and not very materialistically in The Feminine Mystique came about. You know, she says that women could not be simply asked to quit their jobs that they had been allowed to take during the war, and so they had to be kind of culturally and ideologically sort of reprogrammed into a form of labor linked to domesticity and invisibilized as such, invisibilized as work within the home. And, you know, for Firestone, the family in this kind of 50s mode is inextricable from the rise of, well, the generalization throughout society of Freudianism, the misguided feminism, she says. And, you know, part of her analysis, and, you know, it is not what I kind of center, right, or even pay completely, you know, I don't necessarily pay attention to this, but for her, you know, the prison that is this nuclear family situation is propped up by psychoanalysis, which could have liberatory possibilities, but doesn't. And in fact, you know, channels us into the opposite of politics and the opposite of political struggle, and channels us onto the psychiatrist's couch, the analyst's couch, rather than raising out consciousness as collective agents of history. I mean, okay, of course, having said this, I mean, and there are compelling and also very funny kind of elements of this critique, but it is the case that, you know, Firestone commits the sort of cardinal errors of, you know, forgetting, or she lapses. There are times where she gets it, and more times, unfortunately, where she lapses into, you know, blindness or, you know, unawareness of the Black feminist radical critique of the whole kind of Betty Friedan moment in feminism, where, you know, figures like Angela Davis were saying, you know, well, which women are you talking about as excluded from the labor force? You know, wages for whose housework? We already have wages, right? Not that, sorry, I'm eliding Friedan and Federici, which is obviously kind of bonkers, but you know, there were problems with elements of the articulation of housewife misery that could be leveled at both the sort of the feminine mystique and then the wages for housework moment, which is sort of concurrent with Firestone, right? Wages against housework and the dialectic of sex are sort of different ways of articulating the need to abolish the family in the same exact moment, really. Although it's strange because I don't really think they are often thought of as
okay, Sophie is being exceptionally confusing tonight. But let me just like pause and make sure people understand what she just said. So, part of the reason that the nuclear family is a problem for socialists is because they believe that women in the nuclear family do the unpaid labor of literally having and then raising the next generation of proletarian workers in the form of the children. Okay, so they believe that capitalism created the gender binary. The gender binary, that means men and women. The gender binary put men in the workplace where they had access to all the power and all the money, put women in the home where they were doing unpaid labor of the care work of being a mother. They believe that women disproportionately did that work pretty significantly, so they're kind of like not even acknowledging that men are parents too. They say that this is like entirely the domain of the women. Then they were saying that women, in addition to being mothers, oftentimes had to go get another job where maybe they were paid, but now the woman is actually doing twice the work where the man is doing half of the work, because the woman then has to come home and do again the unpaid labor of raising the children. That's what she's alluding to right now. Socialists do believe this is one of the reasons they want to abolish the family, because they believe that it is unfair that women are doing this unpaid labor. There is also something about, like, they believe that quote unquote motherhood should be paid for by the state, because in the act of having and raising the children, you are providing the capitalist system with the next generation of proletarian workers who will be oppressed under capitalism. I know that's a lot if you're new. Please let me know if you have questions in the chat.
Exact kind of contemporaries, if you know what I mean. I make a kind of case in my book for them both being family abolitionist texts, you know, and, you know, wages for housework quickly became
wages for housework
in many ways liberatory on race as well. Black women for wages for housework was an important plinth in that global movement. And it is often misunderstood. This is not what we have gathered here to talk about, but, you know, I do have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about the misunderstanding of wages for housework as a kind of sort of anti-utopian demand for literal wages, when it is in fact about the sort of exploding of the reproduction-production distinction on which the entire kind of edifice of work society rests. And it's about refusing work having become visible as workers who wish to abolish themselves as workers, right? Brackets, that's the point of communism, not some kind of redistributive justice.
So Sophie is not in favor of paying women to have and raise children in the family because Sophie is anti-work. There is an anti-work movement on the socialist left. We haven't talked about it at all that much at all, but there is actually people just rebelling against this idea of being workers. That's what the proletariat is. They are the workers under capitalism. So if you've heard about the idea of like quiet quitting, where people kind of show up to a job and they take a salary, but they don't really do anything, that's considered to be like an anti-work strategy. There's also strategies that they're going to be trying to, in the next 4 years or so, do some sort of like massive like strike thing. They're already trying to organize it where basically like every worker just goes on strike at the same time. So that's part of the anti-work movement. So Sophie is saying, I'm not really in favor of like this paying people to be, you know, parents, because, you know, then they're going to be workers and we don't want workers. We want to abolish work. They said earlier that they want to replace work with play. In the future communist utopia, there won't be work, there will be play.
Okay, but yeah, trying to keep kind of keep to the point here. Yeah, I mean,
was Sophie on drugs this day?
I Firestone came from an extremely traditional and orthodox patriarchal household.
Jewish.
She distinguishes between the biological family, which she says is sort of transhistoric, and the nuclear family, which is only a few decades old, or no, about a
They believe, or at least Firestone believe, that the nuclear family isn't even that old. So the nuclear family is a construction of capitalism. They believe that other types of family units existed before that.
Century old at the time when she is writing. Yeah, it's important to understand now that in the 21st century, we have a sort of mutated configuration of that property logic. It's above all a property logic, you know, dividing people into isolated private properties legitimated by...
Oh, now we're really getting into it. We're gonna have to listen to this again and break this down. Remember, guys, when socialists say capitalism, they mean private property ownership. That is what they mean. So who is supposed to keep clean and keep the home in order? Seems like there's no money in the socialist utopia, so you're not paying anyone. They want to eliminate all money. They want to eliminate all banks. You're going to be responsible for keeping your house clean, but it will be in a completely different environment than what you're thinking of, because they've eliminated all money. They've eliminated all banks. There will be no way to pay someone to keep your house clean unless you want to give away your ration cards. Do you mean refining work activities as play or actual different activities? In the socialist utopia, you will not have access to the same types of work opportunities that you have access to today, because the vast majority of the companies that exist today will be eliminated because they're not necessary in order to live. So in the socialist utopia, you know, the most common thing people understand about socialism and communism is that the workers control the means of production. Okay. Now, capitalism is not just an economic model, it's also a cultural model under the left, but let's just focus in on that piece of it. What they want to do is, so right now, I can go to the grocery store and I can choose from like 87 different kinds of deodorant. Okay? Someone has to produce the 87 different kinds of deodorant. There have to be factories, wherever the factories are, that are producing the 87 kinds of deodorant. There are workers that are producing the 87 kinds of deodorant. There's whole industries built up around this. Socialists would look at this problem and they would say, why do we need 87 different brands of deodorant? Why do we need all these different options? We don't need 87 different types of deodorant. We need one. Okay? So instantly, they're going to make the decision that you don't get 87 choices anymore. You get one. That dramatically reduces the number of people who are working in those industries. It eliminates a lot of it. It eliminates a lot of excess. And so when socialists are thinking about production, they mean producing for the needs of the community, not the wants of the community, the needs of the community. And you don't need 87 different brands of deodorant. You only need one. Okay? So when they're talking about, like, everyone has to understand, when we're talking about the Marxist utopia that these people want to build, it looks nothing like our current society. So if you're trying to do an apples to apples thing to say, you know, it's going to be just like what we currently have, except maybe people will starve a little bit more. No, that's not what it's going to be. They want to eliminate all money. They want to eliminate all banks. They want to eliminate all police. They want to eliminate all prisons. There are no luxuries. People don't, except if like you're in control of things. There are no luxuries anymore. There's no choice anymore. There's no excess anymore. But they also believe it's going to take a lot less time to produce the things that we need. And so people will have all their basic needs taken care of. You're going to get assigned a home in the socialist utopia. You don't get to pick out your home. You get assigned a home. You will never own your home because they will own your home. There is no private property ownership. So everyone owns the homes, but you get assigned a home. So you will always have a place to live. The state will provide you with all of your health care. The state will provide you with all of the energy you need or the energy they allow you to have. The state will provide you with all the food you need or the food that they allow you to have. You will go to the community canteen and you will pick up your rations, and that will be the food that you get. You will do the job that they assign you. If you don't like the job that they assign you, tough cookies. If you don't do that job, you don't get the food rations because they control the food supply. Do you see how all this works? So what they argue is that we will have less overall need for work, so you'll only have to work for a couple hours a week in the fields because they're going to dramatically reduce the amount of options that are available to just getting it down to the basic needs of society. So you're trying to make an apples to apples comparison here with what we currently have, when it is not an apples to apples comparison. So, well, it may not be your house, but you're still the one living in it. So are you just going to let the garbage fill up? I mean, that doesn't make sense. Does Sophie ever acknowledge that women like having and raising their own children? Sophie does acknowledge that, and she says if you like doing that, you'll still be allowed to do that. Yeah. All right. All right, guys, let me know if you have questions. I do want to remind you guys that I have a shockingly low number of super chats right now. And I just want to remind people that I'm doing this in my free time on a Saturday night to teach all you guys about this stuff. So if you appreciate what I'm doing, please feel free to send in a $5 super chat, a $10 super chat. I am 100% grassroots funded by you guys. So if you guys don't, pay for this stuff, it might not happen in the future. If you're enjoying Socialism Saturday, I hope you will continue to support the work I'm doing. And let's bring those numbers up. I'm not saying I'm not going to stop the stream or anything, but I might stop the stream if people don't start sending in super chats. So reduction of work by taking away wasteful complexity. Well, yeah, kind of, but not quite that simple, Daniel. Won't there be multiple families together? There could be. Yeah, there absolutely could be. Alex, hey, super appreciate you very much Love, so much loves. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you as well. Thank you for being a member of the channel. I appreciate it. Trendolin. We can always count on Trendolin. Trendolin, I'm going to get you that penguin mug. I swear. I swear I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Thank you, thank you. All right, let's continue. No. Soros does not fund this at all. Soros does not fund the radical revolutionary left. They fund progressives. So it's a completely different thing. This is not George Soros. Anyone who told you that Soros is funding these people lied to you, and my strong recommendation is you should stop listening to them. This is absolutely not funded by George Soros.
Ideologies of sort of biogenetic and marriage or
Nick,
marriage adjacent sort of certification in the eyes of the law is still a very important component of the ordering of both neoliberalism and neoconservative power. This is kind of the analysis that Melinda Cooper gives in her book Family Values, where
hey, Alex, and now with the super chat, not just the member chat. I got my Trump I love you and the McCarthy is right shirts today. Well, make sure you take a picture of them, Alex. I would love to see them, and thank you for shopping in the merch store. I do appreciate it. Yeah, Soros doesn't fund these people. I know that's shocking to a lot of people who don't like listen to the left as much because the conservative influencers lie to you. But Annie, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're learning stuff. Thank you for the super sticker, Annie, and thank you to Rottweiler for the super sticker as well. Hey, we're back in business. We're back. It was looking grim for a second. I was like, I'm not making any money tonight. This is going to be like a big old zero, but no, we're back. All right. We do still have that $100 goal, guys. I would love to hit it, and let's just keep going.
Basically in response to the age-old complaint that the family is kind of dead, basically this is a phrase of Sarah Brouillette's when she reviewed Cooper, the family is not nearly dead enough, right? It is always undead. In fact, people have been complaining about the demise of the nuclear family since way before Firestone was even kind of
family's not dead enough,
inveighing against it. There's the part of the logic of the family for Cooper is its perpetual crisis and it's the need for it to be defended. And that's paradoxically why it kind of can be put at the center of an austerity logic that sort of blackmails us into little chauvinistic kind of teams, ensuring our survival at the expense of a sort of potential for different class insurrections. I don't know.
Hey, thanks,
if I were
Kristen,
working off notes, this
you.
would doubtless be a little bit more comprehensive and articulate, but I hope there was something. Do you agree? Yeah. How do you understand it?
I actually think that what you were we were I think usually there is there's a confrontation when you bring up ideas about abolishing the family, because there's always existing different ideas of what the family means, and there's always it's really much attached to very deep feelings of identity that people feel that configure people's individuality. And I think what you were discussing now is it's useful to make it clear that we were talking about the family unit as an institution that emerged out of a set of property relations, out of a economic unit.
Okay, so again, we're hearing this term, the family unit emerged out of a set of propertied relations. Listen to that again. And Sophie said this earlier too.
That we were talking about the family unit as an institution that emerged out of a set of property relations.
Out of a set of property relations. So the left believes that when and we talked earlier about when the left says heterosexual, they don't actually mean like a man and a woman. They mean someone in a two-person monogamous relationship that upholds normativity. Then those people could be gay. That's called homonormative. So what the left believes is that when you enter into a marriage, whether that's between a man or a woman, or a man and a man, or a woman and a woman, you are entering into a propertied relationship, which means you are the property of your spouse. Okay? We already talked about how capitalism means private property ownership. Marriage represents a propertied relationship. There also has something to do with generational wealth and inheritance, where when you are in the nuclear family, that is a privatized unit where you are the property of your spouse. Your children are also considered to be your property because they are because of parental rights. When you pass generational wealth down from parent to child, that is the literal passing of property, keeping it private within the family. Okay? So socialists believe, communists believe that all property should be collectivized, that all property should belong to everyone. So when you have the propertied family relationships where you're passing property down, you have access to the private resources of your family, that creates inequities. Some families have more money and property than other families. That's what inequity is. When one group has access to more resources, more money, more homes, more land, more businesses, you have access to more private property than other people. That's capitalism. Capitalism creates inequity. Capitalism, because it's based on individualism and in theory meritocracy, creates some people that have more property than other people. What socialists want is equity. Equity means flattening the hierarchy. It means everyone has access to all of the resources. So in order to achieve that, you need to abolish the nuclear family, because the nuclear family is one of the glues that is holding together the propertied relations of society. If you have questions about any of that, please let me know in the chat. Tolkien fan! The revolutionary socialists are funded by memberships, book clubs, donations from activists, the authors, and the academics. They also do events where they sell tickets, they sell merch, but this is actually very good. Yeah, revolutionary socialists are almost entirely self-funded, with some exceptions, but most groups are self-funded through memberships, dues, donations, book sales, pamphlet sales, merch sales, event ticket sales, like all the same ways that other groups are funded. So yeah, most of them are not wealthy. Most of them operate on a shoestring budget, and they are not, absolutely not, I repeat, not funded by George Soros or Alex Soros. That's all conservative bullshit. How do they feel about self-deletion? Well, I mean, you own your body, so you can do whatever you want. That's how they feel about it. You own your body. They believe in bodily autonomy, right? So you can do that if you want. They would prefer you didn't. They're gonna provide you, this is what they think, they're gonna provide you with access to mental health resources. They generally think that people won't do that as much because they're gonna have access to all the mental health care they need, they're gonna have access to all the food they need, they're gonna have a place to live, they're gonna have access to a job. They believe that society will be fundamentally structured differently so that these types of instances don't occur. But if you want to do that, they're not gonna stop you because you have bodily autonomy and you should be able to do what you want.
Out of like a economic unit and a sort of necessities that are like functional for the proper development of capitalism, right? And in that sense, this is like the kind of institution that is.
Hang on, let me listen to what he just said there again. Sorry.
The family unit as an institution that emerged out of a set of property relations, out of like a economic unit and a sort of necessities that are like functional for the proper development of capitalism, right? And in that sense, this is like the kind of institution that is reproducing itself and reinventing itself in different shapes.
So he's literally saying this. He's literally saying the family represents the propertied relation that supports capitalism and is literally reproducing itself. So that's what we were talking about earlier. This is something called social reproduction theory. Social reproduction theory is that social systems will reproduce themselves until they're disrupted. So he's literally just saying what I just repeated to you. Sensato, thank you for the super sticker. Hey, I really appreciate it. I like your icon. It's very, very pretty. Let me add that to the tally here. Now we're cooking with steam, guys. I really do appreciate you allowing me to teach you on this glorious Saturday night. But didn't you say there aren't personal rights? Because no. I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. I didn't say there aren't personal rights. I said that individual liberties are considered to be a form of private property. Individual liberties meaning like freedom of speech, freedom of religion, things like that. But that's something that's not actually really talked about that much. I've heard it talked about once or twice. It's not the biggest thing that the left talks about. So I kind of, but like no one is saying that you can't do with like bodily autonomy is a very, 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 very key value of the left. So no one is saying that you can't off yourself if you don't want to. What they are saying is, and I don't want to have to repeat myself again, what they are saying is that they will provide you with all the resources you need. They will provide you with everything you need, from mental health care to a place to live, to support systems, to a job, to everything, and they believe that people will not want to. So don't make me repeat myself again, Daniel. Listening. Let's see. Nah, Daniel, that's cool, man. That's cool. I appreciate it. Listen, $5 is $5. It's great. Hey, I appreciate it. I especially appreciate when people ask me questions and then they send me a super chat. Yo! Someone just sent in a super chat. Alex! I saw it go up as I was updating the total for the grift. Hey, thanks, Alex. I really appreciate you. Thank you for all the support. We have met the goal, ladies and gentlemen. But don't think that doesn't mean you can't still send me money. If you feel the need, if you feel the inner urge, if you feel guided by spirit to send me money, please feel free to do so. All right. Let's keep going.
And he's historically constituted, right? And that's how we talk about discontinuities and continuities. And yeah, I was interested to know if you could actually say, I mean, more about how you see the family functioning today in that particular way, right?
Oh, that's a good question, Sophie.
And what is your case of family abolition basically today, let's say?
Yeah.
Can I just add something real quick? Because one thing I'm curious about, because both Christopher Chitty and Melinda Cooper have now come up, and I sort of both encountered these texts at about the same time. And what struck me is that Chitty, the way he charts it is like, you know, since the 80s, we've just seen the disinhibition of sexual mores, divorce rates increasing, you know, single parenting increasing, the couple forum being somehow like delegitimized, parenting customs changing. And the picture you sort of get there is like the family is unraveling, which is very different from Melinda Cooper's account, which sort of highlights how, no, in fact, the nuclear family is still very central to neoliberal capitalism. And I wonder what Chitty's politics of family abolition would be. And yeah, this is just to, I mean, this is Felix, what Felix was already saying, but I wonder like where you stand in that debate, or is it like helpful of thinking it as like a, just like demise or reconsolidation, or
Yeah, no, this is that's a super good question. Yeah, well, okay, it's something I would like to give a really comprehensive answer to, and it does present certain contradictions, and I'm intrigued by this framing, which I think is correct. But, you know, I guess part of what this kind of story of the family in perpetual crisis and under threat tells us is that to some extent, family values are...
Hey, thank you, AZ Buckeye Girl. I appreciate you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Ideology can survive quite an extensive sort of on the ground kind of unraveling of its actual, you know, lived reality. I think it's also important to understand that, you know, the family was always somewhat of a fiction. Aspects of its description of social life were always, open kind of lies. Everyone understands that monogamy exists as a disciplinary morality for women, not for men, and that,
So I told you that the thing that they have a problem with is monogamous two-person relationships. That's what they consider to be straight. That's what they consider to be normative. That is the foundation of the nuclear family. And now Sophie's saying monogamy doesn't really exist anyway. Like, it exists for women. It doesn't exist for men because they don't like the idea of monogamy.
Monogamy within marriage exists only, to the extent that, children need to be certified as, biological heirs of men, and
heirs,
so on
property.
And so forth, right? The whole history of prostitution as the supplement, the state-sanctioned supplement to the nuclear family kind of demonstrates the way that it's not actually about genuinely kind of dictating the ways that people live, but it's about providing infrastructures that can police and punish deviations from the property laws that undergird the story.
Property
right?
laws.
So I guess those basic premises haven't really shifted so much, even though there are increasingly kind of single person households. Parenting is changing on the face of it. People go back and live with their parents because they can't afford houses of their own. There are sort of changes and modifications, but I guess sort of the aspirations for neoliberal subjects remain very much tethered to coupling and
monogamy,
procreativity.
Kids.
You freeze your eggs to enable you to have a career, fine, but the essential kind of investment in a sort of future biogenetic portfolio sort of remains in place. We also and B, the logic of verifiable sort of biogenetic belonging is still really materially important at the border and at the border within nation state territory. So not only if you are a kind of migrant family are you subjected, at least in theory, there was a proposal for this, to a DNA test to ensure whether you're actually really crossing the border into the land of family values and democracy as a family, as a certifiable family, because, the myth would be that if you are certifiably, biological relatives, then a sort of set of, affordances and rights and sort of social wages might be, made available to you. Of course, that's not the case because, as Hortense Spillers and theorists in that vein have kind of suggested, the migrant, the Black family is kind of a bit of a contradiction in terms. It doesn't matter how your flesh was generated really, or it does, but only epiphenomenally. The family that we are talking about as a disciplinary structure has a relationship to whiteness and to bourgeois property ownership, right?
Oh!
But still,
there it is. There it is. There it is. There it is. All right. For those who are new, when you hear the term whiteness, they are not talking about skin color. When they're talking about Black families, they're talking about families that are an oppressed class. That means proletarian. It's also not about skin color. So whiteness is a reference to capitalism because they believe that capitalism, private property ownership, created slavery in the United States. Slavery is the ownership of people as private property. White is a reference to the owners. Black is a reference to the owned. Now, at that time, it was related directly to skin color because it was white people who were the owners. It was the black people who were the slaves. However, translate that to modern day, and anyone who is in the ownership, the bourgeois class, they are considered to be white regardless of their skin color. Okay? We know this because Larry Elder was called the blackface of white supremacy on the Los Angeles Times. We know this because NPR and the Washington Post ran stories about multiracial whiteness. We know this because Cheryl Harris, who is the author of the paper Whiteness is Property, literally tells us that black people can be considered white too if they are engaging in white systems related to capitalism. All right. And I have all the resources for that on my Substack. You can find all that information there if you're looking for the receipts. We're not going to go into, all of the receipts right now because you can go find that information on your own. People can also ask questions. What I need people to understand for the purpose of hearing this is that when Sophie says whiteness, she does not mean white skin color. She means capitalism. When Sophie says bourgeois, that means the bourgeois owners as opposed to the proletarian workers. All right? So you've already been listening to Sophie speak for a while. You know that Sophie speaks in very flowery language. Oftentimes she uses different words to say exactly the same thing. So when Sophie says the whiteness and bourgeois, those are both references to capitalism. Now let's listen again.
Phenomenally, the family that we are talking about as a disciplinary structure has a relationship to whiteness and to bourgeois property ownership, right?
Bourgeois property ownership. She's saying it right there. The family has a relationship to whiteness and bourgeois property ownership.
To whiteness and to bourgeois property ownership.
The family has a relationship to whiteness and to bourgeois property ownership. What does she mean when she says bourgeois property? Well, it's exactly what I just described earlier. When we say capitalism means private property ownership, that is a reference to bourgeois property. What bourgeois property is property that you can use to create personal privatized wealth. So socialists do distinguish between private property and personal property. And they use this trick to try to gaslight people. They say, we don't want to take away your stuff. We don't want to take away your personal property. We only want to take away private property. Okay, now it's important that we understand what do they actually mean when they say personal property and what do they actually mean when they say private property. When they say personal property, they mean things like your phone. They mean things like your computer. They mean things like your truck or your pets or like things that you own. But those are not things that you can use to generate a large quantity of personal, private wealth. What can you use to generate personal, private wealth? Well, you use bourgeois property. Bourgeois property means private property ownership. That means your ability to own a home because you can sell your home and make a lot of money. Your ability to own land because you can sell the land and make a lot of money or utilize the land to make a lot of money. Your ability to own an apartment rental that you rent out as a landlord because you make money. Your ability to own intellectual property because you can use it to make money. Your ability to own a private business, whether or not private businesses is big or small, because you can make a lot of money. Your ability to have parental rights over your kids because that is the passing of generational wealth from one generation to the next. Do you guys see how that's all bourgeois property? All of those things can be used to make a lot of money and keep it privately within the nuclear family and pass it down from one person to another. That privatizes wealth out of the community. That's what they're talking about. Listen again.
Doesn't matter how your, flesh was generated really, or it does, but only epiphenomenally. The family that we are talking about as a disciplinary structure has a relationship to whiteness and to bourgeois property ownership, right? But still, there are stories that are used to exclude, right? So people at the border can be subjected to family authenticity tests in order to police and discipline and incarcerate them. And then in hospitals, sometimes homicidally homophobic parents can be given access to the bodies of people because of their kind of family link, whereas the partners and comrades of queer people, as we know, obviously, including from the history of AIDS, are not given the sort of social rights that should be there for next of kin. So we have insurrections against bourgeois kinship, I guess is a way you could say it. We have
property kinship
movements of sort of counter kinning, the sort of indigenous and black kinds of
hang on. Might seem unrelated, but they're doing the 15-minute city stuff in Indiana with zoning pause that I think would make it illegal to work at the same address you live at. See, yeah, so no, that's actually not unrelated at all, Kyle. The 15-minute city stuff, well, it is being pushed by different people. The 15-minute city stuff is not at all unrelated to this because the 15-minute city stuff is about making sure you're in proximity to get whatever resources you need very quickly. So that's interesting. They're doing that with Indiana. That's a very red state to be implementing what is effectively a socialist globalist policy.
Sort of alternative articulations of kinship that is explicitly made, right? Not imagined as given, which is much more kind of multiple, plural, and oriented towards not leaving people out in the cold. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you've brought up like this.
Yeah, Tyrone, this is not what they're talking about. They're not, when they say property, they are not talking about cooking utensils. That's just not true. That's just not true. That's not true at all. Now, what I will say is they do consider the family and dinner time and the kitchen table to be something they want to eliminate, but it has nothing to do with cooking utensils. What it has to do with is the control of the food supply. So we have Sophie on tape literally saying that they want to eliminate the private kitchen. They don't think that people will be cooking in their own homes. They think that they're going to go to the community canteen, have all their food there. Sophie's always quick to say, if you want to cook in your own home for pleasure or things like that, you're still going to be allowed to do that. You're just not going to want to cook in your own home because you're going to be able to go to the community canteen and get everything you need. So what you're talking about is not related to what we're talking about, with the exception of the fact that they do want to eliminate the kitchen because that's one of the things they want to move from the private within the home to the communal.
Things around biological reproduction and how that actually inflates or like divides or informs feminist struggles, let's say. Like my own, so I have this is something that is like part of my own interest and like my private research or like current obsession, if we want to call it like that, which is the way in which, okay, the family is this institution that we are understanding as performing like cultural reproduction. So it reproduces the values of the society and it also performs biological reproduction, right? So like there is perceived in these two particular aspects. And it is precisely when it comes to the role, or like it's in both, but I feel that it becomes more like at the moment when we were talking about biological reproduction, it's when it has become its turn. It can get turned against particular queer struggles. And I was interested in what you were saying now of like the different forms of feminism that articulate against particular privileges or advantages that you get by having this kind of belonging through like biological kinship. And I was curious about when you've been, because you have worked around these particular issues when it comes to actually gestation and what it implies. It's like if you have come up with some moments in which precisely the fact that there is such a thing as biological reproduction has make a point of departure between, or create tensions between feminism and a queer movement, which has, in my opinion, always been very much like connected historically in the same concerns, like the emancipation of gender and sexuality, let's say. So I don't know.
The emancipation. Whoa. The emancipation of gender. Ooh, now we're getting into it. Twilight Angel, you're about to discover that not only do they want to get rid of women, they also want to get rid of men. Because this is not the Democrats. This is not the progressives. This is not the liberals. This is the radical revolutionary far left. They don't care about women's rights. They don't want women to exist. They also don't want men to exist either. And that's what you're about to find out. Okay, listen to what they said here.
In feminism and a queer movement, which has, in my opinion, always been very much like connected historically in the same concerns, like the emancipation of gender.
The emancipation of gender, what does that mean? What does the emancipation of gender mean? Does anyone know? I know you guys know. Come on. The emancipation of gender. Hang on, just waiting for some answers to come in here. All right. Another word for emancipation is going to be liberation. Liberation means to free one's self from. So if we're looking at emancipation of gender, to free oneself of gender, okay? Here is what the left wants. Well, they don't just want to remove gender from the nuclear family, do they? They want to liberate gender. They want no gender binary. So do you guys know how we talked earlier about the fact that the left believes that capitalism created the gender binary? They believe it created it by putting men in the workplace where they made all the money and had all the power, and women in the home where they did the unpaid labor of raising the nuclear family. Capitalism created the social constructs of men and women. That is what the gender binary is. What they believe is that created a hierarchy where men had access to all the power and the money, and women had access to nothing. The radical revolutionary far left wants to eliminate all hierarchies. The way to eliminate the gender hierarchy is by eliminating gender altogether and creating a world free from the gender binary. When they're saying the emancipation of gender, they are saying freeing society from the hierarchy created by gender categorization. That gender categorization was created by capitalism as a function of how that works. They mean to abolish gender. So it's not a legal thing. Trump actually got this right in his executive orders. When Trump banned the teaching of non-binary in school, which is a great thing, he got this right. Because that's what they're trying to do. When they were teaching your kids that they're non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid in schools, it's because they want to eliminate the gender binary altogether. They want to create entire generations of kids who don't believe that men and women exist. And they were being very successful at it. More successful than most people understand. This is why there were so many non-binary people all of a sudden. This is why there were so many genderqueer people all of a sudden. It had nothing to do with gay. It had nothing to do with trans. Trans and queer are not the same thing. It had everything to do with emancipating society from gender.
And sexuality, let's say. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So Firestone is really important, I think, as this is helpful. As a kind of paradoxical.
Hang on. No. Bro, none of this is Maoist. You keep bringing up Mao in China. None of this is, they still have gender in China. Mao still had gender. Like, this has nothing to do with that. In addition to that, the people that you're seeing on the screen right now talking about this are not Maoists. They are Marxist Leninists. They actually specifically denounce Mao. They denounce Stalin. They denounce Mao. This is not Maoist. Whoever taught you that, and I'm betting it was James Lindsay, whoever taught you that lied to you because he's desperate for clout and money, but it is simply not true. There was still gender in Mao's China.
Because she herself doesn't understand this and doesn't think about queers. But she's a paradoxical kind of point of mediation, maybe, between women's liberation and kind of queer liberation, because she insists on children's liberation. And that's I think the
children's liberation. Let's talk about children's liberation for a second. Okay, capitalism means private property ownership. Parental rights are considered to be a form of private property. What the left believes when they're talking about children's liberation, hang on.
Children's liberation.
Children's liberation. When they're talking about children's liberation, what they mean is freeing children from the oppression of capitalism. In this context, that means getting rid of parental rights, because they believe, like Scientologists, that children are but adults in little bodies that are autonomous beings that can make all their decisions. They believe that parental rights are a form of property ownership where children are literally the private property of their family. That means they're literally like slaves to their family. That's what private property means to them, that you are a slave to the propertied system, and that in order to liberate children, they need to remove parental rights, abolish parental rights, because that removes children from being the private property of their family. Who pays the anti-work people? Well, they write books, they write articles, a lot of them are freelance people. So it's not as though they're not doing work, it's that they're doing work in different ways, but they're still advocating for a society without work. Now, what you're trying to do is what I warned you not to do at the beginning of the stream. You're trying to debunk, you're trying to own the libs in order to feel morally superior. Let me tell you what, the Communist Manifesto says that they're allowed to engage in capitalism as long as they're trying to overthrow the system. So guess what? Those anti-work people, they get to have jobs. Still within their belief system. The reason you're doing this is try to dunk on them. They're saying that work shouldn't exist, so who is paying them? They still have jobs. Just because they're advocating for work not to exist, because they're advocating for a Marxist society, doesn't mean they don't have jobs right now, because they exist in capitalism. They have to survive in capitalism. That's why the Communist Manifesto literally tells them that you're allowed to engage in capitalism as long as you're trying to use it to overthrow the system. This is why we don't debunk the socialist guys. It never works out well.
And that's I think the vanishing mediator potentially. We think about the history of gay liberation in tandem with children's liberation, but actually the component of children's liberation in feminist history is often forgotten. And that's a really interesting problem or question. Why is that? For Firestone, she is incandescently opposed to the proprietarian aspects of the mother-child relation. And she has
the proprietarian aspects of the mother-child relation. That's what I just explained. Parental rights are a form of private property ownership.
This fantastic series of, kind of riffs about how she gets it. She gets what the affordances are of having a baby of your own to fuck up as you please, And of course, the struggle for kind of gay and queer kind of equalities and liberties has included the desire to have that same complicated, ambivalent, option. As a feminist, we don't, I don't know, I don't think many people sort of demand of other feminists that they immediately kind of stop having children and enjoying kind of that complicated, messy, partially proprietarian kind of relation. But we sort of do seem to demand that of queer people. But for Firestone, it's extremely important that nobody think of babies as their own. And so that kind of helps us when we think about the gestational labor, that
nobody think about babies as their own. That's because parental rights don't exist in their utopia. All the children belong to everyone. It takes a village to raise the children. I've literally heard Sophie say that children should have multiple sets of parents. Therefore, there are no parental rights over the children because they all belong to everyone. As I explained to you earlier, and listening is fundamental here because I really don't like repeating myself just because people aren't listening. In the Marxist utopia, if you don't work, you don't eat. So, who's going to work in the Marxist utopia? People who want access to the food, because the only way you get your food rations is by going to the job that they assign you. Yup, well, they're winning and you're losing. So wrap your head around that as you're thinking about that. They are winning and you are losing, and they are going to win at some point because people don't understand what's going on and they dismiss them as mentally ill, and every single time someone dismisses these people as mentally ill, they make more progress and they take over more institutions, and Donald Trump isn't going to save you and the executive orders aren't going to save you because these people have institutional power, not political power. They also have cultural power, and that is far more powerful than even the president of the United States.
Queer couples or, gay couples or households kind of want to...
hang on. Am I right in assuming that child sexual abuse won't happen in the community that raises the children because people would have access? Yes, partially true. Okay, I think there is some acknowledgement that, bad things happen even when you have safeguards in place, but they do believe that when you create a society in which, and again, this is a utopian thing, but I'm explaining what Sophie believes, when you create a society in which everyone cares for everyone else, sexual abuse of children wouldn't happen because that's just not a part of the framework of their society. They do also believe that providing mental health resources to a greater number of people in whatever proportion you want, that will reduce the risk of abuse and things like, and crimes being committed and things like that. So yeah, generally speaking, that is what they believe. Can you live independently away from the collective if you don't want to interact with the community? Hey man, if you want to grow all your own food, then you can probably, if you want to build your own house, if you want to maintain your own homestead where you are a completely self-sufficient person. So what that means is you grow all your own food. There are no supermarkets. There's no community canteen for you because you're not working as part of the collective. So if you're not working as part of the collective and you don't get a house that they assign you, you have to build your own house. You have to do that. They aren't going to pay for any of the maintenance at all. They're not going to take care of any of the roads around you. They're not going to do anything to help you at all. So if you want to go buy your own giant piece of land and create a completely self-sufficient, and I mean completely there are no supermarkets. There are no stores. You don't get access to any of you make all your own clothes. You make all your own. You don't get access to electricity because you're not part of their ecosystem and they control all the energy. So I hope you have some way to generate electricity. I hope you have some way to generate internet. If you want to do all that stuff, yeah, they'd probably let you do it. But if you don't want to do all that stuff, then you're going to have to figure out a way to interact in their community. Oh yeah, medical care, you don't get that either. You're not part of their system. You get no medical care. Congratulations. It's actually even harder than becoming Amish because the Amish can still shop in our stores. The Amish can still go to the hospital. It's not even Amish, though. It's not even that, because the Amish can still interact with our society, right? We're talking about a world in which you don't play by their rules, you don't fucking eat. You don't get access to anything. So, good luck.
Enroll, enlist, surrogate for them. You know, Firestone actually provides us with a very kind of clear, uncompromising, platform that tells us, no, the baby doesn't belong to anybody in the first place.
Baby doesn't belong to anyone.
You know, a child's dependence on adults should always, in all circumstances, be conceived of as something plural, collective, mutual, and limited in scope, right? She says that children's dependence on adults should be the basis for the formation of a unit that then disbands upon the child's majority. She thinks it's really important that households should disband once they have kind of committed together to the nurture of a vulnerable because very young kind of person. And that's a question of emancipation for all people concerned, you know. So you have this kind of ethics and politics of multi-gendered polymaternalism, I would argue. I mean, she yeah, it's not how she would necessarily see it, but for me, this implies, you know, a very kind of sort of.
All right, guys, I'm going to speed up the playback a little bit because we are getting to a little bit of a crunch time in terms of being done by 9 o'clock. I'm just going to speed this up just a little tiny bit. It shouldn't make much difference. We usually don't do this, but I'm going to tonight.
I almost want to say I sort of universalist, I sort of, yeah, in a good sense. There's, you know, we are all kind of faced with the contingency of our embodiment. I mean, many people with uteruses don't or can't or whatever gestate. You know, she doesn't understand how much her theory of binary, you know, her theory's dependence on binary sex sort of leaves out all kinds of people and all kinds of realities. But it doesn't really matter, because I think if you squint, you can read it as a very kind of gender abolitionist kind of text, and the, you know, the imperative to produce each other transgenerationally, including and intergenerationally, is kind of there, right? The opposition between a kind of queer struggle for access to reproductive technology and a feminist struggle for that same access disappears, you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, for instance, in Spain, there was like this debate a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think. By the time of the elections, it was included in the program of the Biden. They framed themselves as like the central liberal party, but basically they were like right neoliberals. And their own point was that they wanted to bring the demands of the LGBTQ community by making legal surrogacy as it stands within a capitalist society, let's say, creating the enterprises where women can enter like surrogacy and stuff like that. And it was a heated debate actually, because it was in a way also dividing deeply what they conceive as the demands of the mainstream LGBTQ movement, which I don't know like who was actually the representative of that in particular, and like the particular lines of feminists who were actually arguing against that. And I like the way you actually come up with this idea of what you just were discussing about that once you actually detach the idea, the notion of property of your own like fetuses or your own children, then you're already moving beyond this idea of who, like, whether your family is in itself necessarily this idea of owning people and creating a set of relations that are like framed within the family in itself.
He just said again, the family is the idea of owning people. Daniel, if you think you're going to produce a farm on a beach in South America, best of luck to you, buddy. But I think you're living in a fantasy land that is not real.
Yeah, sorry. No, go on.
I was also thinking about, and Alex, you should come in also at some point as well. But I was thinking in the sense in which, by defending the family as the place of the woman, which is a position that sometimes some some parts of the feminism have occupied, they are coming into a clash with the demands of some LGBTQ, like some demands of the LGBTQ movement, from moving away from the family as an institution where actually sexuality is not fully expressed. Because if you want to reproduce the institution of the family as the reproductive unit of a society, you also need to set particular gender and sexual roles, right? Mm-hmm. And in that way, it becomes kind of antagonistic with the project of sexual emancipation.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of these really interesting contradictions exist within like the figure of Firestone herself. You know, the anecdotes collected in these, you know, memories on the occasion of her, you know, really awful, tragic death, alone in an apartment. You know, include these kinds of anecdotes about how when she was 20, she invited a heterosexual couple over for Thanksgiving to her house, but she just simply hadn't cooked the turkey or anything, because, I mean, she was definitely this kind of non-neurotypical figure who had these kinds of macho kind of predilections as well, right? She talks in her book about how awful it is when, you know, men want to go out with you and talk about Simone de Beauvoir with you while leaving his wife at home with the diapers. And she understands that, but she's the one going out with the guy to talk about Beauvoir. And there's this anecdote about how she had her friends over for Thanksgiving, and the woman ended up in tears because there was this kind of terrible, kind of maybe structurally queer way in which she, but you know, only in a very limited sense, kind of queer, because actually macho, you know, she was sort of, I'm not doing a great job of articulating these tensions, but there is something so fascinating and therefore useful about her personal responses to the sorts of contradictions between her desire and the structures that police them in the present. So she's on the verge of femme solidarity, you know, because she likes to get fucked, I think. and she doesn't like cooking, but she has contempt for women who do. And that's the bit that really kind of falls flat and becomes a kind of anti-queer component of her theorizing, which also makes her thought about pregnancy that little bit less effective, because the reasons she has for denouncing pregnancy, many of them are quite powerful, but then some of them are like, oh, it's gross, it's really feminine, it's monstrously feminine, you know. And that's a part that I think really weakens her claims and exposes her to all these kinds of rightful you know, criticisms and disputes and confusions over the years. But what if we could kind of, you know, take the brilliance of certain moments of her kind of bombshell, kind of dickhead, angry, rageful, utopian kind of collision with the structures of 1960s American sociality, and sort of supplement them and complement them with all the insights of Black and queer radicalism. I think there's something there, you know.
Yeah, Alex, do you want to say something? I wanted to come up with something else, but since I've been
already, I have nothing smart to say. I've just been enjoying about. I enjoy the loving critique of Firestone very, 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 very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lesson in some ways, isn't it? She wrote this kind of brilliant thing, but you know, she dedicates it to Beauvoir. And in the very first pages of her book, she talks about Beauvoir as someone whose brilliance overshot its mark, right? This is such a fascinating aspect, because she herself is clearly identifying so hard. She has a problem with Beauvoir's kind of intellectual overshooting and commitment to a sort of Hegelian concept and a certain kind of existentialist framework that she thinks is leading her awry. Yeah, perhaps she has overshot her mark.
That's funny. Sophie says that Firestone thought that Simone de Beauvoir overemphasized Hegel, had like a too strong of a commitment to Hegel. Which, if you listen to some commentators who think that Hegel was a wizard, you would think that Hegel is like the only thing that matters to the left. But Sophie's saying that there was critique saying, no, you're a little bit too committed to Hegel there, bro.
And she kind of, she talks about Beauvoir in this very kind of personal, invested way. And then here I am kind of thinking that the same can be said of Firestone. And as soon as she kind of gave birth to this text, she basically, died a political death. She couldn't bear to talk politics again, by some accounts. It was unbearable. And I think that's partly because of a certain kind of, machismo. I always want to say, she kind of, she doesn't have that necessary kind of
Well, Tyrone, this is a great question. Are Black and queer synonymous in this context? Yes and no. Yes, in that they are both considered to be oppressed groups under capitalism, and they're both considered to be like, basically the oppressed class, where you have white versus black, white being property owner, black being non-property owner, or in some cases the property. Queer being so in the queer one you have normativity or norms that uphold capitalism, whereas you have queer would be the oppressed form of that. So in that sense they're similar, but they are also talking about two distinct groups of people: the Black feminist movement, the Black queer movement, the Black Panther movement, the Black Power movement. Those were all separate things and were very real Marxist movements that are different from the queer Marxist movement. Now, in theory, they're all fighting for the same thing. So they're in solidarity. They would view themselves as solidarity because they believe like the Black Marxists are comrades, the queer Marxists are comrades, but they are still two distinct groups. So great question.
Attention to vulnerability and contradiction. She doesn't tolerate perhaps the sort of the elements of kind of, traumatized, messy, investment in the structures of the present. She doesn't finally tolerate them. She understands so well, in order to joke about it, why it's nice to kind of have a baby and a house and so on. She can joke about that with enough empathy to make it very vivid and true and relatable. But then ultimately she burns up in disgust. She doesn't know what to do because her utopia is so totalizing. I mean, by the way, I haven't even mentioned, she talks about annihilating culture. The list of things that she wants to abolish is unthinkably long. And today we are, a lot of us, abolitionists. We talk about prison abolition and abolishing the police and the border. But Firestone wants to abolish culture. I haven't heard that talked about very much in the last few years, and I'm not sure I really know what it means.
We're reading a book right now in the Counter-Revolutionary Book Club called Against the Gendered Nightmare that is explicitly about abolishing everything. So that does exist.
One of the most dated chapters in the Firestone. But she's an artist. She really just wanted to paint pictures. And so having written this kind of almost unbearably ambitious text, I don't know how she read Freud, Marx, Engels, and all these terrible reactionaries. She has a real a bee in her bonnet about this kind of reactionary chauvinist psychologist, Theodore Reich, I think. Am I getting that right? But she keeps quoting this terrible psychoanalytic thinker. And she's clearly, she read so much. She kind of remixed it.
And she
somehow.
did it at 25. I'm turning 25 in 2 weeks. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It's curious that you're saying this about abolishing culture, because just today I was reading this text from Auguste Bebel, was Women and Socialism. I think Socialism, the future of Society of the Future. I don't remember exactly which one was, but he's mentioning about this idea of culture exactly when discussing about abolishing the family, in the sense of
the 3 A's, Trendelin, are activists, authors, and academics. So what Trendelin is talking about are the people who are the leaders on the Marxist left. It's not just one person because they're not a hierarchy, they're collectivists. So I call them the 3 A's: academics, authors, and activists. Not artists, although artists could certainly be considered activists as well.
The argument was something like culture exists based on the fact that we have servants that have created the material conditions for culture to emerge. So once you kind of give away this, you do away with culture. I don't know if that's what Firestone is, like, where Firestone is coming from, in the sense that we would have some sort of expression that would be something different to what has been historically conceived as culture, because it's based on like the separation between mental labor and physical labor or something.
Yeah, as I understand it, there's something very kind of, I mean, on the face of it, deeply deterministic about her understanding of a sort of dialectic between the masculine technological principle and the feminine aesthetic principle, and that, you know, this needs to be like undone. I'm not really equipped to comment on the nuances of it and the extent to which her dialectic is sort of self-aware or already kind of, it does seem to me that when in her opening salvos about the concept of nature, which I myself, as an erstwhile human geographer who was really in the weeds of eco-Marxist and Marxist feminist ecological debates about the production of nature as an accumulation strategy, in the phrase of Neil Smith, you know, I'm more comfortable with talking about nature than I am about culture. Although, of course, you know, for Haraway, the concepts need to be, you know, collapsed into nature culture. I think, you know, for me, it just reads as deeply as incorrect. The parts of Beauvoir that I also disagree with would be the same as Firestone's take on nature as kind of a real thing, you know, and something to be overcome, you know, and dominated. But she quotes Beauvoir as saying that humans are not animals, and like you can kind of understand the Enlightenment sort of set of preconceptions that contained within that statement. You know, at this point, I don't even know how to find my way back to criticizing, you know, the basic sorts of divisions and dyads of, you know, man versus nature, because in human geography, we've kind of taken off into all kinds of different animacies, and you know, we're talking about symbiogenesis and the sort of art of non-human species. But, you know, I think it's kind of, it's part of her somatophobia, I would argue, when she says that, you know, with Beauvoir, that humans aren't animals. I mean, we obviously are. And if that is supposed to mean that we should kind of, you know, gain a sort of mastery over our bodies that entails a sort of a suppression, a repression, disavowal, a colonization, then I would argue that the politics there is always going to end up being racist. But I am okay with talking about a sort of a métis, sort of grassroots, plural, cyborgian approach to technology that would include a utopian commitment to having things like ectogenetic biobag supplements for humans.
There it is. We saw this yesterday. Okay, who knows what Sophie means when she says
to having things like ectogenetic biobag
ectogenetic biobags. I'm going to tell you what Sophie means when she says ectogenetic biobags. She means having babies born outside the womb in bags that are filled with salt water that are like baby pods. Sophie and many other Abolish the Family people want, in order to eliminate parental rights, in order to eliminate the nuclear family, they want babies born outside the womb. This will also degender the reproductive process, which means you won't have to be, like, it doesn't matter if you're a woman anymore because we're birthing babies in these bio bags outside of the womb. Yep, we're talking about birthing pods, people. Birthing pods. Artificial wombs. That's what she's talking about.
Implements for human gestational labor that could be kind of shared and developed and made available, although not imposed. You know, so we could talk about,
not
you know,
imposed,
she does actually say this in a kind
available.
of non-compulsory way. She talks about how babies could be born to male and female bodies, you know, both, or or potentially to machines. But the compulsory sort of and mutually defining link between femaleness and maternal gestational authorship would be severed. I think it's interesting to remember that things become unthinkable very swiftly in the course of history. And in Philadelphia, down the road from where I'm living, there are actually neonatal sheep being gestated in plastic bags full of salt fluid, which is a surprisingly almost kind of incomprehensibly sort of simple technology that could very, very readily be duplicated by grassroots gestational gyne-punk utopians all over the world, actually. And they are testing it.
Yes, Sophie. Yes. Let's have gestational bags to birth children outside of the womb be reproduced by grassroots gestational punks.
Gestational gyne-punk.
Grassroots gestational grind punks. That's a great idea, Sophie. Why don't we just start a whole movement within the punk subculture, which Sophie is a fucking part of, and why don't we just start a whole movement in which people are birthing their own children in plastic bags filled with salt water outside the womb? Great idea, Soph. Nothing could go wrong with this plan at all. Absolutely nothing to have DIY outside of the womb birth.
Utopians all over the world, actually, and they are testing it, at least they were before COVID, on human, premature fetuses. That was the plan for last year. I actually haven't been able to find out what's going on there. But, it does seem to me that, there is too ready a kind of dismissal of the technological components of Firestone's vision. She is sort of mischaracterized as someone who is of the kind of accelerationist sort of silver bullet kind of let the machines do it kind of variety of Marxist. And she brings that on herself to an extent with the machismo that I mentioned, but actually she completely understands that were gestational labor to be put into the hands of capitalist technology now, it would be a nightmare, as is anything that is enacted by capitalist subjects. I mean, it's never going to be emancipatory if it is advanced by the ruling class. But that's not an argument. The anti-surrogacy feminists are so obviously, to me, bioconservative and sort of woundedly attached to a transhistoric definition of sexed suffering, and a sort of wounded attachment to gestational suffering specifically as something that must not, under any conditions, be sort of shared with trans women or anyone else.
Gestational suffering.
And I think we need to push against that politics, even as we push against the kind of homonormative politics of kind of, gay parenting on the property mode, right? The sort of...
So I mentioned earlier, the problem that the left has is not with whether or not something is straight versus gay. It's whether or not it is normative. So they believe that gay couples who engage in gay marriage, who get married in a monogamous two-person relationship and have kids and have a house and all that stuff, they are homonormative. They're assimilating to the culture of heteronormativity. They're assimilating to the culture of the straights, okay? Queer Marxists did not want gay marriage legalized. They were writing about this before gay marriage was legalized. Conservatives didn't realize this because they never bothered to listen to the left, but queer Marxists did not want gay marriage legalized. They lost. The reason they didn't want gay marriage legalized is they didn't want gays assimilating to the norms of the straights. What Sophie just said is, it's also homonormative when gay people get married and then they have these propertied relations. That's exactly what Sophie's talking about. Gay couples assimilating to straight norms, normative activity, which is not really about being gay or straight. It's about norms that uphold capitalism. Thanks for the super chat, Rottweiler. I can see the commercials for shake and bake babies. Yeah, what a great idea that is. Listen again.
And I think we need to push against that politics, you know, even as we push against the kind of homonormative politics of kind of, you know, gay parenting on the property mode, right? The sort of the confusion of sort of gay nuclear parenting with queer liberation, you know. I think it would be cool if we could all kind of share the work of pregnancy a little bit, interrupt it, you know, delegate it, attenuate its burdens qua work, by really thinking, you know, in a utopian fashion about how to organize it. Because if you just look at it in that pig-headed way I was talking about at the beginning, which is kind of that childlike way in which, you know, Firestone is a subject of children's liberation as much as she is of women's liberation. You know, it doesn't make sense. Pregnancy is unacceptable. and that simple, you know, blinding truth of her book is something I think, you know, really deserves preserving.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah. I really like how you put this, exactly the two opposites that become to collide between the homonormative desire to have the kids on their own, to build a family that has their own genetic code as well, and then this kind of good attachment to pregnancy that can also like overflow into like maternalistic discourse that then expand to like different areas of like the political ecology, let's say. That's interesting. I like that. It was very clear how you put it for me. And
Yeah, no,
that's not me, that's them. That's not me. That's them. I don't know what the fuck just happened, but that wasn't me, that was them. What the fuck? That's not me. It's only on what the fuck? What the fuck?
I just said that I think I spotted an octopus on your bookshelf. Can that be?
Oh yeah.
Sophie is obsessed with octopuses. Sophie has a giant octopus tattoo.
My essay about octopus eros is coming out in N+1 really soon, and I'm a little bit nervous.
Oh no! I'm so happy that conversation is being kept alive.
Good. That's good to hear, you know, because some people are really kind of unkind about the sort of supposed like
yes, I know about Sophie's giant.
I don't know what I'm being charged with. It's kind of opportunistic or venal or self-promotional to make hay out of the scandal, or you know, which I'm also often accused of engineering on purpose, you know, as though when I was tripping on acid and making my remarks about an octopus documentary, I kind of knew what would occur and how it would somehow make me famous and get me
on acid with Sophie.
An essay at N+1 magazine. You know, it's not the case, but I feel quite upset nevertheless sometimes with the sort of the imputation of this kind. And also I don't want to instrumentalize that poor octopus.
I do love Sophie.
But yeah, I do. I'm really proud
of
the
Sophie
work I've done thinking about erotophobia in the current COVID conjuncture and speculating as hard, you know, as thoughtfully as I can about the reasons we freaked out en masse about me noticing that a cephalopod was sexy, particularly right now. So I think, that would be another cool thing to have a conversation about at some future point, maybe.
Definitely.
Is there anything else that we should touch on?
Yeah, I think, what do you think about wrapping up by now? And maybe we can just comment on it. This is not a small question, but we can address it, or I don't know, like, see how we feel. But one of my questions as well is like, in which sense family abolition is a revolutionary ideal for both feminism and queer politics, which I think we have touched upon many of these things already. Like, how do you see this? Why is that in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's indisputably, you know, it's known as one of the sort of demands of gay liberation. To a lesser extent, I think we're aware that it's part of utopian socialism, Charles Fourier, and then, you know, Bolshevik figures, Alexandra Kollontai. But I think Firestone is seen as standing alone in the sort of feminist sort of department of the history of revolutionary struggle in talking about it. And that is deeply unfortunate. And as I say, I don't want to let her off the hook, because it's kind of a crying shame that this happens to be the case about her discourse, because it is fair to say that it is a chauvinist discourse in some senses. There are moments of real kind of femphobic kind of contempt and paradox. It's paradoxical, because she's kind of so, she's so anti women who put communism before feminism. Like, she goes on and on and on about it all the time. She thinks it's a real problem, and women need to kind of raise their consciousness and get their priorities in order. And she's so patronizing about it. She speculates about all the reasons why women are still kind of brainwashed into putting their own needs second, and that's why they are leftist instead of feminists or whatever. But you could maybe speculate that she is protesting too much, right? Because and I realize you don't get very far, like, sort of armchair psychoanalyzing, but the tenor of the analysis is so I wonder if she would have been more comfortable in a way in a queer organizing setting, because then she wouldn't have had the internal fight with with her own gender nonconformity. Perhaps speculating. So, but it sucks that she's the voice of family abolition in feminism, because actually, there were so many lesbians and Black organizers, womanist or intersectional feminist socialists who are talking about mothering in this kind of dialectical utopian way, and talking about children as belonging to no one but themselves, to quote the Sisterhood of Black Single Mothers, who are talking about revolutionizing welfare and the foster care system, in terms that I would call family abolitionist, right? Who are talking about placing care, but not just any old care, an emancipatory, comradely care at the center of transformative politics. And if that was what we thought of as family abolition, rather than this kind of rude, muscular, kind of femphobic statement about how pregnancy is like shitting a pumpkin, and we should just admit that pregnant people look wrong. And I realize I'm playing into this problem, because I am kind of choosing this text to talk about, and like I'm singling it out, and that's because it has many other kind of marvelous features. But on this specific point, I think family abolition would have been better served as in its legacy if it had been articulated by someone who was maybe queerer, or part of the Black lesbian struggle of single mothers and other mothers, and coming from that kind of perspective of marginalized communities whose knowledge in the domain of survivance and care and kin making against the family, real family making, real families against the family, if you like, if you want to capitulate and use the word family in a sort of transitional sense, that would have been, I think, that would have made my job in 2020 easier as someone repping family abolition, because people would understand it as something about love, and about comradiness and proliferations, of tenderness and provision and abundance, and not simply a sort of like a kind of top-down technological fix. Not what she says, but she it isn't a mystery why she has been misunderstood in that way, right?
Yeah. I really love this idea of unbounding love from like family commitments towards like a real sense of care and solidarity and comradeship. Once family institution is not like kind of policing these relations, the family unit, like in the way we're talking about it now. Yeah,
totally. I mean, there's this personal anecdote I shared towards the end of my book where and it was a memory that only came to me or returned to me 2/3 of the way through writing Full Surrogacy Now, which was really a bit of a shock, a bit like finding yourself naked on stage in the middle of a show or something, but I share it in the book. I say that I was in the car, this nuclear family context of the family car, with my brother in the back seat with me and my mother in front and my dad driving, and I was sort of precociously talking about a play that we had just gone to see en famille, And I was like, oh, but it doesn't make any sense, Daddy. If you suddenly found out that, my brother, that Ben and I were technically the children of the milkman, you wouldn't suddenly love us any less, right? Right? Huh? And there's just this horrible silence. And I didn't get the answer that I obviously needed. And it's not that I wanted him to lie. I wanted him to give the answer I needed and for it not to be a lie. And I think I did understand at that moment, perhaps on some level, that of course there are people who are bio family to one another, who are biologically fathers and mothers or whatever to one another, and who do love each other in a comradely way, in a curious way that actually kind of presupposes that everyone needs to be adopted. A baby can come out of your body and yet, is a stranger and has nothing to do with you and is not simply a continuation of your identity, right? And that's where comradely parenting does occur. And if you experience that, or even experienced it sometimes, great, good for you, it's wonderful. But there is a logic, and I think in people like my father, it's quite, integrated. That really the point of caring for someone else is because you really, they are an extension of yourself, and that is such a violence to be on the receiving end of. And so I've always been interested, I suppose you could say, in in that queer premise that that kinship can be made into a real commitment, into a something approaching unconditionality, but not on the basis that you have some biogenetic property that links you, but on the basis of a sort of a will, of a decision, of a comradliness, of a series of actions and affinities out of love, and it's not that it makes it superior. It's not superior.
We're almost done, Jennifer. We're almost done.
With someone who has, no biological link to you. It's just that queer people, by virtue of necessity, have become extremely
I'm a member of Sophie's
skillful.
Patreon.
It's not enough. It's still not enough, unfortunately. I don't want to romanticize, queer community. It's not enough. It's not good enough. But
hang on. So family abolition is both a revolutionary tactic and a goal? Yeah, it's both. They cannot abolish capitalism without abolishing the nuclear family. So in that respect, it's a tactic, but abolishing the family is also like a goal. I mean, it's kind of the same thing.
But it is something kind of asymptotically kind of gesturing towards the truly livable earth that I think many of us really hunger for.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
A beautiful place to.
So yeah, I think we can finish now, if that's fun. It was really nice to having you, and it was a great discussion.
Thank you ever so much. Yeah, it's been great. I'll see you, in gatherings and meetings throughout the pandemic, and maybe in person one day.
See, I told you we were almost done, Jennifer. We made it. We made it before 9 o'clock. I mean, that wasn't as crazy as yesterday's episode. If you really want to see Sophie at peak Sophie, you need to go watch yesterday's episode of The Cult, because that was just next level. Sophie is a spectrum. Sometimes she's extra Sophie. Sometimes she's just like, she's barely even a socialist, and you just never know what you're going to get. But that was still a great episode. I appreciate being able to break down Abolish the family stuff for people who hadn't heard of it before. Sophie, of course, is our queen. She is our goddess. We will see her again, I am sure, at some point. But now we do have to wrap up, because Jennifer, or more aptly her husband, Mr. Jennifer, is going to be starting our movie night in the supporter Discord. This is a new monthly movie night that they're going to be doing, where they're basically doing a Mystery Science Theater 3000 takeover, and they're going to be doing commentary over the movie. It is called B's, C's, and Double D's, and they're basically watching pornography with Muppets. At least that's what I'm told Meet the Feebles is. I've never seen Meet the Feebles, but I think some of you have. So it's pornography with Muppets and a Mystery Science Theater takeover, and Kino's going to be joining, so there's going to be a couple people doing commentary, and that's going to be in the supporter Discord, and that's going to be starting right now. So if you want to join for movie night, please head over to the supporter Discord. If you have not yet signed up for the supporter Discord, what you need to do is head over to my Substack. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. Go to the digest email. Click on it right in the middle of the screen. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. And underneath this red box right here, you will find the link to the supporter Discord. This is for supporters only. This is $8 a month, $80 a year to help support the work I'm doing, which I really appreciate because I'm 100% funded by you guys. That gets you access to the Discord. We will get everyone verified in the Discord so everyone can participate in the movie night in the Discord. And so head over, get into the Discord. Let's do movie night. And then, of course, tomorrow we have our regular movie night. We do movie nights every Sunday at 8 p.m. and every Monday at 9 p.m. Sunday, we're doing Dirty Dancing. Finally, after 3 years of me begging Jennifer to show this movie for Romance Movie Month, she's finally doing it. So I finally got my way. Yay me. We're doing Dirty Dancing tomorrow night in the supporter Discord at 8 p.m. And on Monday, we are doing A Walk to Remember at 9 p.m. hosted by Mac B. So get into the supporter Discord. You get access to all the movie nights. And if you don't like any of these movies, come back next week. We'll show different movies. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. All right, guys. That is all I have for tonight because we do have to wrap up. As a reminder, I do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. where I will answer your questions about the radical revolutionary far left. We also do The Cult Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. I stream far left stuff usually during the week. Sometimes we do other things too. So stop by the channel. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already. Make sure you have mounted the like button if you are not already. Thank you to everyone who sent in a super chat tonight. I really do appreciate it. You guys help me do what I do and you keep me streaming on the internet. So I can't do it without you. Really appreciate it. And that's all we have for tonight, guys. Let's go watch Muppet porn in the Discord. All right. I'll see you guys there. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you here?
That's difficult to answer.
the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.